All right, everyone. Thank you for joining the Prop Talk podcast, where we talk about all things boats. Today, I have our guest, Danny Roberts. Danny works for Northwater Marine. He has a ton of experience in boating. I've known Danny for about 5 years now. Very excited to have you on the show. Danny, why don't you take a second and introduce yourself?
Thanks for having me, Dylan. My name's Danny Roberts. 27 years old. I've been in the business about 12 years, which is kind of a crazy mismatch of numbers for a lot of folks to digest. But I've been in the business pretty much my whole life. Worked with Dylan at one place, and now I'm running Northwater Marine over in Weirs Beach here in Laconia, New Hampshire.
Yep, on beautiful Lake Winnipesaukee.
Yes, sir.
So, Danny, you started as a dockhand. Tell us a little bit about your progression in the business, because I talk to a lot of guys in the business, and a lot of them are much older than you in the same exact position.
Very much so.
But you also got an earlier start. Although a lot of these guys did start early. Kind of run us through how you started. Like what was appealing to you in the boat business at 14, 15 years old?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. In 2012, I was 13 years old, and I was basically told, my dad sat me down one spring and said, well, you can either go to summer camp or you can go to work. And at the time I'd had little jobs, done chores and things like that. I'd kind of learned the value of $1, and I decided why not go to work. As far as how the marina business came about, it wasn't that I went out looking for a marina job. I'm from Wolfboro, New Hampshire, which is a small little town, 5,000 people, one main drag. There's a finite number of businesses and things for kids that age to do. You either mow lawns, wash dishes, or scoop ice cream, or work at the marina. And believe me, I tried all of them. I thought about mowing lawns, thought about washing dishes, applied to the one ice cream shop in town that everybody wanted to work at. There's probably 100 kids applying. 5 kids got to work there. None of it seemed to pan out real well. So the next business in line, after I'd kind of gone through the whole town, I had a fat stack of applications in my hand. And, my dad said, why don't we go up to the marina? Down Sewell Road out to what was then Goodhue and Hawkins Navy Yard, and walked up to who was then the general manager and who would wind up being my boss, walked right up to Steve Durgan, who anybody that knows or knew Steve knows that that's not an easy thing to do, walked up to him and said, hi, my name's Danny, and I'd like to have a job. And he turned around, considered me for a second, and said, no. That wasn't the end of the story, obviously. He gave me an application, told me I was too late. He already had a full crew, but if I was willing to come back at the end of the summer and work for him, and in August into September, when all his high school and college kids were leaving, that he'd give me a shot. And if it worked out, he'd hire me for a full season the following year. And that's exactly what I did. And the rest, as they say, is history. Here I am,
What was the first thing, Steve, when you started working for him? What was the first thing he made you do? This is a pretty famous first move for Steve Durgan.
The pivotal thing with starting to work at Goodhue and Hawkins at the time was your first lesson was there is nothing that is not considered your job, from driving boats to cleaning toilets and everything in between. There was no such thing as not your job.
One of my favorite things that Steve Durgan used to do is when he would hire a new dockhand, the very first thing he would do is hand him a mop and a bucket and say, all right, that bathroom needs to be cleaned. And that was the gauge of how, that was your retention gauge, basically. If you did those two things, you got the mop and bucket, you basically had a job there.
Absolutely. I saw that dozens and dozens of times. Mine specifically, because I showed up at so late in the season, they threw me on a bottom wash stand.
Oh, my God.
So for the first month of my career in the boat business, I did nothing but bottom wash, and it was torture. It was everything I hoped the job would not be. I was standing there next to this beautiful lake and all these beautiful boats, and watching all these guys do cool things, talk to people, and make money and get tips. And I was up across the street, buried in bottom washing for 8 hours a day.
And for those of you who haven't bottom washed a boat, what this entails is you get dressed, head to toe in rubber, like a rubber rain suit.
Yeah.
And at 14 or 15 years old, they say, make sure you mix the muriatic acid 10 to 1.
Yep.
and you're going to spray it on and wash it off.
Absolutely. And there wasn't, now things are very, environmentally conscious and safety conscious. Things are very different. Back then it was a bucket and a brush and a bucket of mysterious white powder. You mix a little bit in, you stir it up, you slap it on, and then try not to get it in your eyes as you wash it off. And that was the size of it. It was, luckily it was only in the 90s that first week, so being in a rubber rain suit wasn't that bad. and that's what I did.
The thing about muriatic acid is that it doesn't sting, it just itches.
It's terrible. I would go home with, it was either wear these crazy goggles that I think at the time the service manager gave me that were horribly uncomfortable and you couldn't see out of them, or don't. And because at 13 years old, you don't know any better. You take the darn things off and you tough through it. Well, I'd go home, looking like I had just tangled with a nest full of mosquitoes and itchy and miserable. And if there was ever a time I was going to give it up, it was going to be right then and there. But the promise of getting to work the full season had me. And every day, the biggest thing that one of the things Steve Durgan was famous for, at the end of the day, you got a handshake and a thank you at the end of every single day. So I went home no matter how few or how many boats I washed, I got a good job, handshake and a thank you. And at the time, I had no idea, but I seriously think now that was a deciding factor in that third week when I would have crawled through a bed of nails to not bottom wash another boat.
No kidding. Switching topics here, you started as dockhand, you kind of put in your time there. And then I know you had spent some time as a manager of a small marina up in Sunapee, New Hampshire. What are some of the things you learned as you progressed through, being a manager of the dock department? Well, not the docks, but a manager of sort of the front end of the operation in terms of dock hands, bottom washing, filling gas, customer interacting, to now managing the store.
Yeah, that's a great question. At the time, Goodhue and Hawkins, as it was a rapidly growing enterprise.
Still is.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Still is. And one of the great things about it was we were kind of perpetually not short-staffed, but perpetually kind of stretching the envelope when it came to working with what we had. And it presented all sorts of opportunities to learn and do new things. And if you were of a mind to pay attention and put in that little bit of extra, you could learn all sorts of things that probably weren't part of the job description. So, you turn 16, you get a boater's license, you're moving boats, you're running boats, you're driving boats, you're delivering them up and down the lake, here, there, and everywhere. You turn 17, 18, they put you in a truck. You learn how to run trailers and tractors and do all the back end stuff. 18, 19, I was promoted to what they called head dockhand at that time, which was as a dock manager, as it were. Got an opportunity to lead a crew and spend my school breaks. I'd go back and got a chance to learn to turn some wrenches and do things of that nature, which was all just incredible experience. You bring that into, I did that all the way through high school, into college, and in college, got to basically run the front end of those summer operation, running a crew of me and one other guy, Alex Conrad, who I actually work with now. We got to run a crew of about 20 people, split right down the middle, opposing. We ran 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. And that was probably the greatest experience because it was the name of the game was figure it out. Here's what you got. Here's the resources you have at your disposal. Here's what you need to get done and figure it out.
There's a lot of ingenuity in the boat business, more so than I've seen in any other industry that I've ever worked in. Particularly, as you said, in other words, making do with what you have.
Absolutely, and the time compression, the seasonality of the business is something that is so conducive to that. You have, no matter what kind of year it is, you have 5 months to do all of your front end business till when the switch goes on, you go. And it doesn't see, the latency of having to decide what the best decision is foregone by the it needs to be done now. You don't have a choice. It has to be done. So it inspires a lot of ingenuity, and it brings out for, if you have that ability to make decisions on the fly and do that, it'll foster it like no other business I've ever seen.
Yeah. One thing that a lot of people don't realize from a customer facing point of view is that exactly as you said, our season boils down to roughly 5 months. And only half of the battle is getting the boats to the point where we're splashing them in the water and, the customer is taking delivery of the boat for that season. The other half is getting them out of the water. And then the unspoken half is all the work that happens behind the scenes, all the maintenance items that are done in the off season. How do you guys, and given that short time frame, how do you guys optimize? What's one thing that you've done that has really saved you a ton of aggravation, and you thought to yourself, "Wow, I wish I'd done this 5 years ago"?
There's certainly a lot of that.
Well, give us the top three then, or top however many.
As far as optimizing what you have, for me it always comes back to who you have. You can have 5, 6, 7, 10, 12, 15 service technicians. But if the production numbers are low, the production numbers are low. There's a finite there's a finite amount of time to get through all the work that you have. So just like any other service business, optimizing your people is number one, making sure you have the right people in the right places to get the things done. The other thing we've come across recently is insourcing versus outsourcing. In our business, there's a ton of subletting work. It's just the nature of the game. There's always somebody that has too much, and there's always someone who's looking for more. So subletting, as far as especially accessories and things like canvas and upholstery and fiberglass, there's a lot of outsourcing in that regard. What I've realized is it all depends on the situation you're in. We've done a lot of insourcing on our detailing and our buffing operations. We've really kind of trimmed the fat as far as service goes, optimizing with fewer technicians that can turn work faster, keeping all that in line, and
incentivizing them, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. You have to, that goes right back to having worked with Steve Durgan, is the people are important. You're asking a lot out of your people. The seasonality of the business, for one, is something that not a lot of people are willing to put up with. And asking that much out of people, you really have to take good care of your folks.
So to kind of summarize that, putting people in the right place and optimizing what you choose to sublet is what's helped you guys sort of streamline your process.
Absolutely. And it also leaves a lot of room for growth. You take what you have and you optimize it, and you find that there's a percentage that you can go north. And that's always, it doesn't always have to be playing catch up, right? If you take out the dead spots and you trim the fat, and you suddenly realize that you've got, X number of percentage more capacity than you thought you did if you take the time to really work out all the kinks.
In the marine business, I find that there's a fine line between thriving and surviving. And I think a lot of marinas have that sort of I'm going to survive mentality. And you have the marinas that say, how can I switch this around so that we're thriving? And I think in a lot of cases that it can be as simple as what you said. Maybe instead of subletting your fiberglass restoration or like buffing and gel work, you find a guy that wants to do it internally, and all of a sudden you go from hauling 10 boats a month to a place to have it done. Now you're doing it in-house, and you're doing it cheaper. You're getting a better quality of work.
You're absolutely right. There's a tendency to lean in on that survival instinct, and that we just need to get through this and move on. There's so much more opportunity in that, and that goes back to industry trends, right? I'm sure you've seen it, I've seen it. There's a trend in our business that's, admittedly, it's changing. It's changing because time-wise it has to. But I don't want to say the old guard. That sounds disrespectful. That sounds disrespectful to the guys that came before us. But there's a generational change happening in the business where there used to be there was no young guys coming up.
No.
At all. There wasn't. And if I talk specifically about myself, I feel like that's where a lot of my opportunities came from. There just wasn't a lot of, not, there wasn't a lot of competition. That makes me sound really bad.
No. Well, dude, it was a dying industry for a long time.
It was.
You had a lot of guys that had been in the business for X amount of years, and we'll use Thurston's as an example. Thurston's occupied your guys' location before you moved in.
That's
and
correct.
They sold Cobalt. And they had this old mentality where the price is the price, and we sell the best product, and nobody else competes. Well, guess what? Competition came in and eliminated them.
It's true. It's there was so much lag there from guys that didn't, and industry as a whole, guys that didn't feel like they had to do anything different, that didn't want to do anything different, that didn't want ever a picture of the business being any more than it was. They figure, okay, we do boats. That's all we do. That's it. You put them in, you take them out, and as long as your numbers are green and your costs aren't red, you're okay.
Yeah, and kind of circling back to that whole management, point of view. You say that Steve Durgan, the guy that trained you how to really manage people, would always say thank you and shake your hand. How do you apply that to your management style?
As I could talk for days about all the things I learned working under Steve. He was such a larger than life personality. For me, it was what of all the things, all the hundreds and hundreds of things I took away from working under Steve was, your people matter too. That's as simple as that sounds, you protect you grow your business, you protect your interests, your customers always come first, quote unquote, but your people matter too. You need to make sure, you need to look out for the health and the well-being of your folks. At the very least, everybody should feel appreciated for what they do. And one of the really big things him and I, had I'll call them discussions about it over the years. Simple things. You don't berate people in public. You don't, if you have critiques, they're done in private. Just simple things like that. And that's, from a management perspective specifically, not just related to our business. Just, managing people and learning how to interact and care about the people that work for you is something I think. Well, personally, I think it's lacking in business in general, not just ours, but it's something that I find really important and something I try to carry forward with me every day.
One thing that I thought was really interesting when it comes to management styles is that they did a survey of 100 individuals, and they asked these people, what is most important to you in terms of communication styles and management? And the three selections that these people made based off of a description of these, they basically gave them three scenarios in which, and they said, pick which style is the best. So the first one, it was a very well-polished statement towards an employee. The second one was a polished statement using select words. And the third one was kind of just a bunch of hodgepodge, but the tone of voice was very good.
Yeah.
And out of those three scenarios, 87% of people said that they were most receptive to a better tone of voice than they were to how someone said it or what they said in management style. And
I believe it completely. Absolutely.
And sorry if that's a little bit butchered, but what you say in terms of your tone of voice is much more important than the words that you use to describe something.
Absolutely. It's not what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And the other thing specific to our industry that I think, and again, I think it's changing. I think it's changing organically.
Changing fast.
Oh, absolutely. Is we have, and I say we loosely, we have a tendency to have or be affronted by the new and the scary and the unknown. So I think there was. I don't know if there is now. I certainly don't think it's nearly as prevalent as it used to be even a few years ago. There was a tendency to take your youngest and hungriest people. Most of the time, your top level functional employees, or your functional management, your mid level management people, and there was like this mass death of ambition in our business. You saw it everywhere you looked. There was, middle-aged to young guys dropping out and going elsewhere and going to other industries as a whole because they didn't feel heard. They didn't feel like anything was ever going to change, and they couldn't find pathways to the top in any sense of the word. And I think that was kind of as in terms of workforce for us as an industry was kind of the scariest part, because if there's no young guys coming up, what are you going to do?
There were a ton of good old boys.
That's a great way to put it.
For a long time, they're like, well, we've done it this way for 100 years, and we're going to continue to do it this way, and this is just how it's going to be done. Well, we stopped using horse and buggy in like 1920.
Absolutely.
And I bet you the guy that said to himself, I'm going to keep making horse and buggies in 1920 when Ford was coming out with the first cars, probably a sad son of a bitch right now.
You're probably right. Yeah.
So the market's changing rapidly, new products coming out. Boats are appealing to a whole new demographic, including some niche markets like Boat Club, which has grown in popularity significantly in the last 5 years, especially with COVID, where there was a limited supply of boats. And the boats that were being supplied were, you had to be in the pecking order to get them.
Absolutely.
And you have marinas that said to themselves, well, how do I capitalize the most off of the least amount of inventory? And that's how Boat Club exploded. What's your take on Boat Club?
So, admittedly, I was not an early adopter on Boat Club.
I don't think any of us were.
Well, for industry guys like us, it was like, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah,
you go over there. I'm gonna keep selling my boats.
And then all of a sudden, they were everywhere.
Absolutely. I was not an early adopter on boat clubs. I didn't really consider it until such a time that exactly what you said, it exploded, and it became something you had to consider as you look at it, for where I was at the time running a marina over in Sunapee, New Hampshire. I had to look at it from, okay, I make, over there, it was 80% of my revenue is rentals. How does that affect rentals? How does it affect boat sales? How does it affect what happens if Sunapee's not a very big lake? What am I going to do if a boat club comes to Sunapee? That could potentially bleed off 50% of my business. The change came really for me was seeing how diverse it was and all the amenities they're offering their customers. And flash forward to today, at North Water Marine, we are now the stable home of Freedom Boat Club, Central New Hampshire, or Lake Winnipesaukee, run by a gentleman named Kyle Gassman, a great guy, by the way. If you're looking to join a Freedom Boat Club in Central New Hampshire, check him out. Kyle and Freedom Boat Club are going to be taking up residence at North Water Marine, in the same area. In fact, in the same building as where I run my rentals out of.
My point of view on that is that that's a very complementary relationship.
Absolutely.
Because you look at Freedom Boat Club, right? You've got, it appeals to a much broader audience because number one, you're not nailed down to one position.
Exactly.
You can take it with you anywhere where there's a Freedom Boat Club location. I think you get 3 or 5 visits out of network a month.
I'm not sure what Freedom specifically is. I do know their network is massive.
Yeah. Regardless to that, now they have access to a boat at a fixed cost.
Yep.
They don't have to worry about storage. Their only true expense is the membership and fuel.
Exactly.
And potentially any damages they may incur. But another byproduct to that is that if someone is in Freedom Boat Club, obviously there's a limit of how often you can use the boat from a pre-booking point of view. Although you can, go to a day-to-day basis. If there's boats in the water, you can go up to a boat club, and 9 times out of 10 you can just hop on a boat. But what I'm getting at is that they may say, "Oh, well, these boats are not available enough for me," and they end up purchasing something.
And that's the thing that's really become attractive about it is if you use use case as your barometer. Boat Club offers people that in the beginning don't use a boat enough to justify owning one. It gets them on the water. It gets them in that boat. It gets them in that boating mindset. And then it cultivates them into, I call them boat people. That's that's very reductive. But, you become a boat person over 1, 2, 3, 5 years in a boat club. You become a boat person. And then you realize, okay, I'm paying for this club. And I love their 23-foot pontoon. That's the only boat I ever want to go out on. But it's only available. I can only get it once a week. I wish I could go out whenever I wanted. Boom, you're a boat buyer.
I'm a huge advocate for it because the initial cost of buying a boat is incredibly expensive. I mean, we're talking to get anything in today's age, modern, reliable, you're dropping 40 grand to get started.
You know what? I think personally speaking from a sales, I think I can get below that, but I think you're right on a broader scale than looking outward at the greater market. I think you're right about there.
At least in this region.
Yeah.
And for any listeners, we are in the Northeast on Lake Winnipesaukee. To get a boat that's adequate for, say a family of 4, and say you're on a budget, you want something decent, say you choose to go into valet, you're going to buy a boat. It's going to be at a minimum $35,000. Let's say you get a pontoon boat, something with maybe a 90 horsepower, maybe a 115, a twin tune, and then you got to buy a trailer, maybe because it's in valet. They got, depending on where you go, they may ask you to buy a trailer, they may not. Then you have to pay for your first years of storage. Like all these things add up. Carefree or Freedom take care of that. I know you guys aren't carefree. But
No, you're absolutely right. As far as the boat clubs go, and I think that's what's driving people to it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, you hate to see a first time boat buyer that's suddenly not a boat buyer. But from a personal standpoint, if that was me, I'd be looking at it too, because you look at your running costs. I mean, you've got a Mastercraft. Look at your yearly running costs. I had a 22-foot Chaparral, and I didn't love my running costs.
Yeah, I mean, you look at let's just talk about fuel. When the boat's loaded up with ballast and you're surfing, you're burning 25 gallons an hour.
Absolutely.
And fuel in the water is at least $4 a gallon.
Absolutely.
So what's 4 times 20?
You just asked me a math question, and my brain just went completely.
It's $80. $80 an hour just to go out and have fun.
You just got to watch me completely.
So anyway, speaking of that initial purchase, it's a little bit on the higher side. You've got companies that like boat clubs that can help alleviate some of that, just to kind of put some feelers out to new boat buyers. What was your first boat? I love asking this question.
Oh gosh. So my first boat I bought turned 16 years old. Actually, the funny thing about that is I turned 16 years old and went out and bought a truck off Facebook Marketplace for $1,000.
What kind of truck?
I bought a 1989 Chevy 1500 step side.
They don't make them like that anymore.
No, they don't, and it's probably a good thing because that truck was terrible. Bought it because it had big tires and a loud exhaust. Took it home, and basically my parent was told that you can either get rid of it or move out.
Every 16-year-old's dream. Literally every 16-year-old's
Absolutely.
dream. Loud truck with big wheels.
Took it to the shop at Goodhue and Hawkins. Drove it up in the shop. Wanted the technicians there to look it out and tell me what they thought. They all told me it was a pile of shit. And one of the technicians there said, "Well, and I go, well, I was like, well, you all don't collectively with your 100 years of experience, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, I love this truck." Took it to get inspected, and it was just never going to pass inspection again. And one of the technicians had a 1986 Marathon Falcon 185. And I can see it in your eyes. You have absolutely no idea what that is.
Not a clue.
So Marathon Boats was a very, very short-lived boat company I believe they were in business from 77 to 92.
We'll put a picture of it in the video.
A Marathon Falcon 185 was this little kind of sport bow rider. Like think like the the boats out of the James Bond movies that had that kind of retro 80s look to it. Yep. Blue, red, white, and blue, everything. Red, white, and blue interior, blue carpet, red, white, and blue stripes, and it had a teak engine cover.
Oh, that's pretty sweet.
And it had the worst motor and outdrive. It had an OMC King Cobra 5.7 with an OMC Cobra single prop outdrive. a 5.7 liter engine in an 18-foot boat that weighed maybe 3,000 pounds. Maybe. Even that was including all the water that had soaked up in the transom.
Oh my God.
Traded the truck for the boat to one of the technicians and fell in love with it. The boat was worse than the truck was. It was a bad deal all the way around. But, no trailer. The thing barely ran. It needed a starter. Got it in the water. A good friend of mine at the time had a slip over in Back Bay. She let me use. Got the thing in the water. Had to check it every day to make sure it didn't sink. But ran the thing all summer and just had a ball on it.
No kidding.
And then, had it for a couple years, and it was just one failure after another. It was to the point where it was like, even I was like, okay, this doesn't really make sense anymore. This is, it was to the point where if I shut the boat off, if I didn't go to the back of the boat and hold my hand over the carburetor to get the boat to die, if I just shut it off with the key, it would backspin and hydrolock.
Oh my God.
So I had to choke the boat out every time I wanted it to shut off. Ran that boat to nothing, and then wound up getting rid of it to a guy that fell in love with it for the same reasons I did. I love that boat because it looked like it went fast. But it was frighteningly fast. It was a chime walking 60+ mile an hour boat that had no business going that fast, but just fell in love with it for the look. But that was the first one.
What's one time or one thing you learned on that boat the hard way?
That chine walk is very real and very hazardous. So for anybody that doesn't know, chine walk is when your boat sits so high up out of the water, there's basically nothing holding you down to the water. And that boat would come out about 96% out of the water. And one day I was going down Wolfboro Bay, went out early in the morning because I was doing a speed run. I wanted to see how fast I could go. Went and got out there, 6 a.m., got out, pissed off all the water skiers, and went bombing down South Wolfboro, and got it up on plane, got it up on the chines, and then let go of the wheel to reach for my phone. And in the 0.2 seconds it took me to reach between my legs and grab my phone, that boat was jumping from chine to chine.
Oh my God.
And then I did the one thing you're not supposed to do when you start to chine walk. I grabbed the wheel, dumped the throttle, grabbed the wheel, and tried to bring it around. And that boat tail whipped and just about tail whipped me out of the boat.
Oh my God.
With, it was an 80s boat. There was no safety lanyard. It tail whipped me so hard, I wound up off my seat in the back, crammed in next to the engine cowling.
Oh my God.
With the boat still running, still going wide open in a circle.
And let me guess, you were pinned and you couldn't get out?
I was able to reach up, get myself turned around, reach up and grab the throttle and yank it back to neutral, which of course hydrolocked the motor. And I just sat there for a while. I just sat there, and there was a guy who was coming in from out on the Broads that saw what happened, and came up next to me. I'm still sitting in the bottom of my boat, like just sitting there. I couldn't move. I couldn't bring myself to move.
Just collecting your thoughts.
And he rolls up next to me and he goes, "You should be dead." He goes, "What happened?" I go, I don't know. He goes, "I'll tell you what happened." He goes, "That was the worst chine walk I've ever seen." He goes, "You should be dead."
Oh my God.
And that's what I learned in that boat. That's the first time that story's ever come out of my mouth. So if my parents ever heard this, they'd be horrified. But that's what I learned.
There's been, even over the last 2 decades, there's been such advancement in hull technology.
Oh, absolutely.
There's boats coming out with higher freeboard. There's boats coming out with sharper dead rises. Boats of that era, generally speaking, had a pretty shallow V.
Shallow V, absolutely.
Which was a little bit more dangerous.
Very much so. I mean, that boat probably had 12 degrees of dead rise at the transom. I mean, just...
Had you been in a newer boat, the transom may not have spun around.
Yep.
And you may have gone slimy side up.
And there's not a lot of 18-foot boats with that much power anymore, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like in the 80s, 90s, you could just buy a four-wheeler for your kid. There were no age restrictions.
Exactly.
Now if you go, and this is so unrelated to boats, but if you try to buy a four-wheeler that's over 90 cc's, it's either 90 or 110 cc's, there's a placard on the side of it, and dealerships are actually trained that they send in secret shoppers and they say, I want to buy this 4-wheeler for my 15-year-old son, and it's if it's a 250 cc's, and you say, if as a salesman, if you are receptive to that and you talk about the product, you just get fined.
Really?
So, yeah, that was back in an era where, you sent your kids down to the store to buy cigarettes for you. And, there was lead in fuel. Like, there's a lot's changed since then.
Absolutely.
Speaking of, talking about all the advancement of boats and, hull technology, how do you feel about electric boats? I can't even talk right now.
I'm not even gonna attempt it.
Electrification.
Electrification? I think, yeah.
I feel like a dumbass.
Electric boats. I don't really. I guess my attitude is on it. They're coming. It's happening. It's one of those things where you're a fool if you think it's not going to happen, because it's already happening. But I think that anyone that thinks that this is going to become the industry normal anytime soon, I think that's also a little bit folly. The technology to date, the leaps and bounds the technology's come, even over the last 2 or 3 years.
Solid state batteries.
Yeah, I mean it's come a long way. I mean, look at flight boards.
Yeah.
I know you have a lot of experience with flight boards. I don't.
I've spent some time on flight boards. Yeah.
But I mean, just the technological advances in it have made it viable, right? And that's half the battle, becoming viable in the consumer market, and it's now viable. So now all it is development. However, I think I doubt that we'll see Tesla style charging stations at the town docks anytime soon. But it's coming.
I don't know if that's the point, or not the point. I don't know if that's the direction that the marine industry wants to take electric boats. We have the perfect infrastructure, basically at our fingertips in terms of, boat slips.
Oh, absolutely.
99% of boat slips have some sort of electrical power at the dock.
Yep.
Which serves as the perfect place to take your boat at night and plug it in.
It's true.
Now, my take on this, and obviously this is just one person's point of view, is that I think you're going to see electric boats. You're going to see more prevalent because there's certain areas where they make a lot of sense. Like, the lake that we're on is 72 or 74 square miles. I don't know off the top of my head. And quite frankly, if you're not driving the boat from one end to the other 4 times a day, it might make a lot of sense for you.
Yep. It's going to go through the same thing the electric cars went through, right?
Yeah.
It's who does it make sense for? And I think as we go on and it develops, I think you're absolutely right. It's going to start to make sense for more and more and more people. I don't know. I was expecting it to take off a little bit more in like the PWC space.
Yeah, what's that brand that just came out with? Is it Taiga? Taiga? Yeah, Taiga came out with
Well, they started with electric snowmobiles.
Yep.
Or was it the other way around?
I think they did. I don't want to speak. I don't want to misspeak on this, but I'm pretty sure they did it kind of concurrently. If they maybe one got released before the other, but they both kind of came to market, available to consumers.
The technology's got to be very similar, if not copy and paste, kind of, as far as like the battery tech and everything goes.
Yeah. I will tell you that a lot. I think that what's going to happen is sort of if you look at Toyota as a great example of this. When the hybrid technology came out, they started making hybrids. But when EV cars came out, they were one of the last to bring a viable option to the market. And the analogy that I'm trying to make here is that Boston Whaler is a good example of this as well. I was just at the New York Boat Show up in at the Jarvis Center in New York City.
Yeah.
And a lot of some of these larger boats are moving away from generators and moving more towards battery banks.
Sure.
Because engines are being equipped with larger and larger charging systems.
Absolutely.
And quite frankly, you don't need to run a generator anymore when you are only using some electrical components that only run for a few hours a day.
Yep.
That's my take. What I think is going to happen, but we're looking into a crystal ball right now. There's no true telling.
Yeah, I will tell you this though. I have heard more talk on development from small. I mean, obviously Mercury's out with electric now. I won't pretend to know a lot about it, but there's a lot of smaller outfits that are doing the same, kind of following the. I can't stand when people say the Tesla model, but it's the Tesla model. You know, doing the R&D first and really honing down on the R&D first. Actually, I can't remember what the name of it is, but there's actually one that's based here in Guilford. There's a group doing some research.
Interesting.
And the one thing like I said, I kind of expected it to hit in the PWC space a little bit harder than it has. What surprised me, and I honestly think it's for the better, is nobody's really tangling in trying to mix electric with like the stern drive thing, because stern drives are falling away. It's, at least for us here. I would assume it's prevalent, but
I think it depends on the market. I mean, you look at Cobalt, Sea Ray, Chaparral, Four Winds, they're always going to have an IO. Like you get the whole stern of the boat, at least in freshwater.
It's true, but there's really no product out there across any of those brands that you can't get an outboard.
I think the biggest problem with electrifying stern drives is that stern drives are inherently inefficient, because you take your shaft that comes out of the engine, it goes into the stern drive, then it goes down, and then it goes at the same angle back out to the props, and then in most cases counter rotates that.
Exactly.
So whatever your loss is, it's got to be at least 10%, if not more.
Exactly. So I was glad to see we didn't take that step of like, can we do it? Nope. All right. So now there's a fistful of weird electric stern drives floating around out there from 2 or 3 years of market, and now we're going to go do the thing that is going to. I think that was a step that we skipped, that everybody was right to skip.
Yeah, and going to all these boat shows and events, you talk to a lot of engineers, and in most cases, when you go to a boat show, the OEMs are there. So you've got Yamaha, Mercury, Honda, Suzuki, and I spoke with the Mercury rep, and they had, I think their 7.5E, and they have like a 15E. He told me they could build a 600 horsepower outboard today, but the restricting factor is that the batteries that it would take to power that would be larger than the boat, and significantly heavier than the boat.
Yeah. And that's the conundrum with. I mean, it was the same with electric cars.
Yeah,
we could make an electric car that goes 1,000 miles, but you're going to be towing an 18-wheelers with the batteries with you to do it.
Yeah.
No, as far as electrification goes, I'm open to it. It's something we all know is coming. It's it's part of the world we live in now, and I'm more just as a interested to see what comes out of it.
So you guys sell, what brands are you selling currently at Northwater?
So currently in stock, or brands we're carrying, we've got Quest Pontoons, which is Apex Marine products, Stingray, fiberglass products, Stingray bow riders, and the like, which is
Stingray's been around forever.
Fantastic brand all the way around. Quest, Apex, which is Apex, Stingray. Carolina Skiff and Sea Chaser products, center consoles, fishing boats. Everyone, even if you don't know it, you've seen a Carolina Skiff.
Built like a brick shit house.
Absolutely. And we just recently became the exclusive New Hampshire dealer for Viaggio. Viaggio is an upmarket, a very, very, very interesting pontoon line built out of Elkhart, Indiana. And they're what we'll be carrying in the premium pontoon space for sure.
So Viaggio has a pretty big spread, and the only reason I know is because during my time at Goodhue, when we were there, they bought a marina up in Maine. At the time, it was called Panther Run Marina, and they had Viaggio pontoons.
Absolutely.
And when they acquired Panther Run, they acquired all of their inventory as well. They had some lingering inventory. They never had any of the higher end product, which now that I've been, we spend a lot of time on social media to promote, the business. Some of their higher end stuff, like the interiors that they do on Viaggios, is incredible.
Viaggio's had a complete rebrand in the last 3 or 4 years. If
Really?
you don't know, Viaggio was Misty Harbor, and
I didn't.
if you've had any experience with Misty Harbor, if it was a good one, you'd be in the minority. Unfortunately, Misty Harbor was just kind of a mismanaged brand. Had some really, really good ideas and some really good strategy, and then just couldn't quite back it up. When it became Viaggio, they retooled everything, and they've come out with some fantastic products. Their premium lines, the Diamante line, is incredible.
Yep.
In our opinion, it stands up to any other premium pontoon you can put up against it. It's well thought out, well built, well optioned, and generally speaking, at a significantly more attractive price point, which is you're kind of getting. You hate to say you're getting more for less because that kind of cheapens the whole thing, but you're definitely getting a lot, if not all or more, out of that premium chassis that you're seeing out of any of the other premium brands. They're doing it on an independent level at a better price.
And what's Viaggio's preference on power options? What are they saying to put on their boats?
Most frequently we're seeing Yamaha or Mercury and Suzuki, excuse me. But they'll hang Honda. I believe they'll hang Yamaha too. I'd have to go back and check that. I've only ever seen one with a Yamaha on it, but Suzuki, they're doing a ton with the Suzuki Stealth line, which is that really sharp gray and black.
That matte black.
Yep.
That is a sharp setup.
Viaggio loves their matte colors, which is a really, really nice transition with that matte gray and black.
They do some interesting stuff with the interior where they mount their speakers too. You said it's a Diamante.
Yeah, so the Diamante, they have a bunch of different layouts for that. They've got 3 different tower options.
Oh, wow.
You're absolutely right. They're kind of pod mounting speakers underneath. Their audio packages are really well thought out, and actually their audio setups are a little bit more geared towards directional sound that you might kind of like they were doing in the Mastercrafts and the bows. They were podding them out a little bit, so you got a little bit more aft facing sound than you might think. It's a very similar.
What's on the horizon for Stingray? I mean, what are they building? Is any new product coming out? What are you seeing is most attractive to buyers? Like, just kind of give us the 10,000 feet looking down on Stingray.
So, Stingray is a family-owned and operated independent brand, and they've been around since the 70s. They've been around a long time. They've got great lineage. They've got a huge following. They're still using a lot of the technology that made them as a company. They recognize the Z-plane hull. They patented that at least 30 years ago.
So what exactly is a seaplane hull in layman's terms?
So the Z-plane hull, what it's doing for you is when you're in a boat and in a V-hull boat and you mash the throttle and you want to jump up out of that hole, what's happening is around the hull you're getting what's called dirty water. It's aerated water, and it's all naturally flowing and getting sucked through your propeller. What the Z-plane hull is doing with the way it's built is it channels that dirty water away from your propeller, lessening the bite on that dirty water. So your prop is biting clean water, popping you up out of the hole faster, better fuel economy, and a better range of performance with different engine sizes on the same size boat. So where on a lot of the since the outboard bow rider is still the new thing on the block, everyone's still trying to figure it out. Where in some brands, if there's an engine option between a 150 and a 200, the 200's great, the 150's a dog. Stingray, the 150 and the 200, you're not going to look at one and turn your nose up at the other. The 150 will do you just fine, but if you want that little bit of extra top end, grab the 200. But just because if you're trying to save that buck or you don't think it's necessary, it's not like you're getting left out in the cold.
So Stingray's optimizing their whole platform in terms of efficiency.
Absolutely.
That's what they're doing best.
Absolutely. And then they're actually at the Miami show, they released their 259, which is their 25-foot dual console. Previously, it was just their the 269, which is 27, almost 28 feet. The 259 is their mid-range. Their 25, it's 2511. Can do
8.6 beam.
8.6 beam. Comes in standard with twins, but they can do it in a single two.
Like a single 400 or something, single 350.
Yep, that's coming. Great kind of mid-sized platform, a really deep and heavy stable boat. Personally, I think where Stingray deserves more credit than they get is in their center console boats.
Interesting. Because you don't hear much about the Stingray center consoles whatsoever.
Exactly. They're growing in popularity down south. They sell a lot of it in Florida. We were actually just at the dealer meeting back in September. I had a chance to run a Stingray 253 with twin 253, gorgeous boat in its own right, aesthetically. The one we had there was it had dual Suzuki DF 140s, nothing crazy on the back.
DF 140 is a great engine.
Oh, fantastic. The thing that blew me away about that boat that I've never been able to do I can only think of a couple other boats that have ever done anything similar. You run that boat wide open, to the nines, wide open on flat water, and you hit your peak speed north of 40 miles an hour, and you lay the wheel over. And when I say you lay the wheel over, you go full lock, port or starboard,
and it bites.
It just turns, bites, and goes.
Wow.
It blew me away. So I think Stingray, I think you'll see them coming up on the market with their center console stuff, because it's a very well built, quality focus boat that performs extremely well.
I look at a brand like Stingray, and I don't think they ever stopped making good boats. There's been companies that have had good years, bad years, so. They've sort of started with a vision, went to another one, and then went back to their roots.
Yep.
I genuinely think that Stingray is one good sales promotion away from becoming on like mass market again. And not that they're not on mass market now, but you look at Boston Whaler, and for anyone's listening, I did a video on this, but Boston Whaler was in the 70s and 80s saw a sharp decrease in sales.
Yep.
And by sales promotion, I mean like more public exposure. And you are probably aware of this, but they used to send a rep to a dealer and take a 13-foot whaler or a 15-foot Montauk and cut it in half in the water.
Yep.
And they even went as far as to take a 180 Dauntless, cut the bow of it off, and they went all through Europe with the front of the boat off.
Yep.
The front fell off.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's and then and that's they're still on that. I don't know if you remember a couple years ago when they brought their 40-footer out. They put like 60 people on it.
Really?
They had that thing sunk to the gunnel door with water over the gunnel door, and they ran it. They bathtubed it and then ran it. It was unbelievable.
That's the kind of stuff in the power of social media that they should be exploiting. Because I've never doubted once Stingray makes a good boat.
Stingray, I've got more people that come to me with Stingrays out of the 90s, even back into the 80s, that love their boats. Their boats run well. Their boats have held up well. They don't have issues with their boats per se, but they can no longer get around that their boat's 30-something years old.
And you know what Stingray does really well? And back to the motorcycle analogy, is like Honda. Honda makes a model for every single person. Whether you're buying a 90cc kids ATV, or you want to relive your youth and buy what they call a Monkey 125, or down the way to a CRF 50 for the kids, or if you want to buy a motorcycle that can go 100 miles an hour across the desert. They've got something for everyone. And I think that's what Stingray does that nobody else does.
Absolutely. So, 17 to 28 feet. And I have just as much fun in their 17 as I do in their 28.
Yeah.
The 172, which is technically a deck boat style hull. Very, gosh, you hate to put bad analogies on your own product, but very bathtubby. It drives like a go-kart. Same thing. You can run that boat. Currently, I've run one with a 115. It's a hot running boat. That's a lot of motor for a small boat. And you drive it however you want.
Yep.
You want to lay it over, you lay it over. You want to run wide open, you run wide open. You want to go slow, you go slow. And the boat doesn't care. And that's the beautiful thing. And that is mirrored across all of their models.
Interesting. Yeah, Stingray, I would say it was incredibly popular up into the early to mid 2000s. It kind of fell off. There was a lot of competition in the early to mid 2000s in that segment, but a lot of brands have sort of followed that sort of tidal wave where, and this is just how I look at it, but you have basically boat buyers come in generations, the way that I look at it.
Yep.
And those generations buy bigger boats, buy bigger boats, buy bigger boats. And then the tailing of that is that there's less demand for the smaller stuff.
Yep.
And like you look at Cobalt, they're coming out with bigger and bigger boats.
Yep.
They've got a manufacturing facility that manufactures their smaller boats, and then they've got a manufacturing facility that manufactures their bigger boats.
Yep.
But you've got all these brands build bigger, drop off all the all the smaller stuff.
Yep.
And then the new wave comes in, and they're like, well, I don't know where to start because the smallest boat you make is a 23-foot boat.
Exactly.
And I don't need a 23-foot boat. I need a 19-foot boat, or in some cases, maybe a 17-foot boat.
Absolutely.
And that's why the pontoon market has exploded.
Oh, my gosh. And that's been, you want to talk industry trends. In my career, I mean, I've been in this business 12 years. In 12 years, the pontoon market has turned on its head a number of times.
The pontoon boat served a very specific purpose for a long time.
Absolutely. I mean, party barge. You know how many people still call it a party barge?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, think of it. They didn't even come out with 3 pontoons until fairly recently.
When I first started, like back in like 2012,
yeah,
the tri-tune thing was still a huge. It was the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Yeah.
You know, now it's like, now I find myself sometimes going the other way. I'm like, well, you don't really need that third pontoon. You're on, you know, it's not just, it's a feature, not a fact.
Yeah.
Like,
and some brands are actually coming out with like an enhanced 2 pontoon version. Like
yeah.
Smokercraft has that interest. I'm forgetting the name of it. It basically is like a catamaran instead of a pontoon.
RPT. Yeah, those RPT tunes, those
RPT
square
tunes.
top tunes.
There you go.
Great idea. Viaggio 27s. Putting, you know, you want to talk buoyancy and physics, you know, 27s, 227s versus 225s, even 227s versus 325s, you know, in diameter of pontoon, you're going to see similar performance out of them. But the crazier thing is, you know, did you ever think you'd see a pontoon with twin 450Rs on it?
Or twin 500s.
Single 600.
Yeah.
I mean, like these boats are like, you know, I never thought I would get on a pontoon boat that went over 55 miles an hour.
I'll tell you what, it's a little bit scary.
It's frightening.
It doesn't feel right. It's like you're accelerating in a lazy boy sofa.
Exactly.
Lazy boy chair, whatever.
That's how I used to pitch pontoons to people. It's riding around your living room.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
It's a living room on the water.
Absolutely. I mean,
and it still is. No matter how fast these boats still go, it's still a living room on the water.
And that is the best way to pitch pontoon boats is at the end of the day. Gosh, how many pontoon brands do you think there are now?
I don't know what the number is, but it's the fastest single out of all the boat styles, the pontoon segment is the fastest growing segment. That's the word I'm looking for.
At the end of the day, they're still pontoons with a deck, some furniture, and a motor.
Which is crazy to me. And speaking of pontoons, the Sea-Doo Switch came out, 3 years ago, right?
Yep.
Do you know the story on that?
I have no idea.
So the first year they were into production, and these numbers may be a little bit skewed, but I would say the proportions are correct. So the first year they produced them, it made some number like 8,000 of them.
Really?
And they had a ton of issues. The Sea-Doo was having an issue where they had a personal watercraft battery in it, you know, a 20 series battery, and it wasn't enough to run the bilge pump while the owners were away from it, so they were sinking. So they fixed that. They put a bigger battery in it.
Yep.
They had a bunch of quality, QC issues. So then production went from 8,000 to 4,000. And then this year, rumor has it that they're only planning on selling 1,800 of them.
I believe it.
And Sea-Doo is they recently, or not Sea-Doo, BRP acquired Manitou.
Correct.
Spent all that money on creating that Rotax under deck mounted 3-cylinder engine.
Yep.
And now Manitou's after this year, I think it's going to be gone.
The brand's for sale.
Yeah, it's for sale right now.
The brand's for sale along with pretty much with the exception of Sea-Doo. I'm pretty sure their entire marine division is for sale.
BRP is getting rid of everything marine except for the Switch and Sea-Doo. Mm-hmm. So I think the Switch is still under the Sea-Doo name. But
yeah, it's still it's all the same. I know they're sold under the same dealer network.
Yeah, yeah, but it's there's other boat brands like Yamaha that have stuck to their roots and they're killing it with the jet drive stuff.
Absolutely.
The only downside to a jet drive, in my opinion, is just the sound and the inefficiency of the drive.
sound and efficiency, and there. And this is, I've said this to a lot of people, and some people are like, "You're just an idiot." Like if you can, they're hard to drive.
They're hard to dock.
Yeah, they're. I mean the constant flow and the fact that there is no such thing as true neutral is always presented a challenge for me. Now it's, I guess what I'm saying is I don't know if I could ever in good conscience recommend somebody buy a jet boat as their first boat. But I think if you do, I feel like you probably come out a better operator because of it.
If your very first boat is a jet boat, you're going to be an expert in docking and low speed maneuverability.
Yep.
By the time you get something with an IO or an outboard.
Yeah, learning the hard way.
But there's also some caveats to that because the way that a boat like that handles at low speeds and docks is arguably backwards to a stern driver and outboard.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
But anyways, kind of wrapping this thing up, we like to end these with my favorite question, and that is, what is the best boating advice you've ever received?
The best boating advice I've ever received. And
you can deliberate on this. We can cut if you need time to think.
I don't know if this is boating advice, but it's been one of my favorite things to say to people in my career. And I don't know if you remember this because there was still a sign hanging above the desk at Goodhue. We guarantee the boats, but not the weather. I don't know how you turn that into advice for somebody, but I guess it factors into somebody owning a boat. The boat will always be there. The weather might not be. And yet, if you don't like especially here, and I say this to people all the time, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change. Wait 5 minutes, drive 5 miles. It'll be different wherever you're going, just because it's the way it is here. It's something with the weather, but we guarantee the boats, but not the weather is my favorite industry quote ever.
That's a really great way of putting it too, because the boat's always going to be there, but the weather's not.
Yep.
So. But anyways, that wraps up episode 2 of the Prop Talk. Dan, thanks for coming on. This is a good conversation. I hope whoever's listening, you gain something from this because there's a lot of knowledge here. So, but anyways, we'll wrap that up. Dan, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.